Hi everybody, it's Susan from Sunrise Quilt Studio. This past week, one of the projects I've been working on are the embroidered quilt blocks here, and coming up with an alternate block. I went through quite a bit to get to this point. I finally have the blocks worked out, have them up on my design wall, and I'm ready to sew them together into a top. But I wanted to show you this week all the steps I went through to get this block designed and coordinate all my colors and get this top made. Okay, I am getting ready to work on the alternate blocks for the embroidered quilt blocks here, and I came up with a design after doing quite a bit of research. I went through my quilt block book and found a design I liked. It wasn't going to be the right size. It was going to need a lot of work, so I went ahead and did the work and came up with something similar. Anyway, this is what I came up with, and I went and I figured out the fabric requirements for one block, or for one block and for 4 blocks, and then went through my stash and couldn't find anything that would match that I had enough of. So what I did was I ran to the fabric store and came up with this purple batik, and this pattern uses a lot of 9-patch and 4-patch blocks. So we've got this would be like the double 4-patch here. We got a double 4-patch, and then we have 5 or 9-patch here, and then there's like filler pieces in here too. So I'm going to start with the 4 patches, I believe. And what I've done is I've cut strips of the main fabric 1.5 inches wide, and I cut 6 of these, and then I cut 6 strips of white fabric. I'm going to make strip sets and then cut them up into the 4 patches. So I'm going to go ahead and get started with that today. Okay, so what I'm going to do is, instead of cutting out, what did I need? 164 1.5 inch purple squares. Instead of cutting out each individual square, I'm going to make the strip sets. Now, strip sets will make the cutting go faster because I'll be cutting 2 pieces at the same time, and I had over 100 of these pieces to cut, so that would save me at least 100 cuts all overall. And with some strip sets, you will have more than 2 pieces of fabric. You just follow your pattern and use how many pieces of fabric that you need. And I'm pressing these towards the dark, and then I will cut them into 1.5 inch wide pieces. And then from there, I will form the 4-patch units. Okay, I have this pile of these little 1 inch units here. They're going to be 1 inch square when they're all finished. Right now they're 1.5 inch this way, and 1.25 this way, and 1.25 that way. That's those strips that I just cut up, and I made enough, I believe, to make 1 block. Okay, so now I'm going to put these together and make 4 patches and 9 patches. So I'm just going to butt my seams together and sew them. I'm going to do the 4 patches first because that will be just easy to do. Now, I chain pieced all of these units together, and that keeps them all connected together and just speeds up the process because you don't have to stop and cut the thread between each unit. And I needed enough to make I think 8 4-patch units, so this kind of sped up the process, and I really needed that because this block had a lot of pieces in it and it was time consuming, so I used as many time-saving procedures as I could. I'm going to press open all these little 4-patch units and then set them aside and work on the 9-patch units. I've got them started. I've got a 4-patch made for each one of them. They need to get pressed open. But let's do this first. And just press to one side. I really hope this turns out. Because whenever I'm working on a new pattern, I always do a test block first and see if I need to make any changes or scrap it all together, because I don't want these alternate blocks to be the show piece in the quilt. I want the embroidered blocks to be the show piece. So I also bought some green fabric to use in case this purple is just too bright, maybe. I mean, it matches the embroidery. I thought about maybe going a little bit lighter, but they didn't have anything there that I liked, so I decided I'd buy some green because I only needed a yard, so it wasn't too bad. Okay, so I've got all of my 4 patches. Once all the 4 patches were sewn together, then I needed to work on the 9 patches. And I started this with a set of the 4 patches and added 2 more 1-inch patches to that, those sets that I had made for the 4-patch units. And that finished off 2 rows, and then I had to add the last row to it. So in this shot here, that's what I'm doing. I'm making the final row for the 9-patch units. So there are sets of 3, and there is one in there that I sewed incorrectly and had to rip it apart and put it back together and do it correctly. And here I'm pressing out the first 2 rows, and then I will press out the single rows of 3, and that's where I realized that I sewed one together incorrectly and have to redo it. So I used my seam ripper quite a bit in this project, and that's the one I did wrong, and I just set that to the other side. So here are the 9 patches that are complete, and just giving them a good press, and I needed 5 of those for that block. So pressing them flat and then pressing them open. And now I'm working on the 4-patch units again, and those all got sewn together with a single 2.5-inch white square. So I had all of those cut out and getting those sewn together and pressing those. And with these, I pressed it towards the white, which, you know, normally we like to press towards the dark, but there's a lot of instances where it works better, at least for me, to press towards the light fabric, and this is one of them, because they're going to want to go that way anyway, and this way I'm not fighting it, it's saving me time, and then I can just flip those units together and then sew them into the double 4-patch units. So once again, I am chain piecing those to help me save some time, and then I will cut them apart and press them. Okay, I have part of the block laid. I didn't have room for all of it, so I've got quite a bit of it though. So I'm going to just start up here at the top and sew it together in sections. So like these 2 pieces, these two, and then this row, and so on. So I will be doing some sewing here. Okay, now I'm sewing all those rows together that I had just pointed out, and I am sewing them together in sections. So the top row is, you know, 2 pieces being sewn together at a time, and then I go to the second row and sew all of those pieces together. And in this one, I am completing the entire row, doing it 1 piece at a time and breaking the threads instead of chain piecing them together. So there are different ways you can do that, and I kind of change my methods throughout the block. I'm just doing whatever I feel is going to make the most sense to me, where I don't get confused, because if I try to do things the same way throughout the whole block, sometimes I get the pieces turned around and then I do a lot of seam ripping, and nobody likes doing that. So I just do what works best for me, and just keep on sewing those pieces together into rows, and then sew the rows together. So, and sometimes I like to flip the rows so that the piece with the most seams is facing upward. That way I can watch those and make sure those seams don't flip the opposite way that I want them to be laying. So that helps me. You can do whatever works best for you. And I am using my regular piecing thread. It's a 50 weight thread, and of course my 1/4 inch piecing foot, and just keep sewing all of those pieces together. And as I said, there are a lot of pieces in this block. It isn't a difficult block. It is simple. There's no set-in seams. There's no angles. It's all just squares and or rectangles. But I still needed to keep everything in order, so I had the block laying out on the table next to me, and as I got finished with each row, I would put it back in position, and that helps me make sure that I have all of the pieces sewn in the right direction. So this sample block took quite a while. I spent, well, 4 or 5 days this past week working on this block. I wound up making several different blocks before this was all completed, but I did get them done. And in here, it's I think I'm working on the very last row and getting all of those pieces sewn together. And doing these sample blocks is a time saver in the end, because I can make any changes that I need to the block before I make a bunch of them. Because I only needed 4 blocks in this set, but the amount of time it took to make one block, it saved me hours just doing that one sample, because otherwise I'd have sewn all 4 of those blocks and then realized that it wasn't going to work, and I would have to have started all over again. And this way I just made one block and decided what changes I needed to make, and went from there. Now you notice here that I pinned some of these seams together, and I do that when I'm sewing the rows together. If I have a lot of seams to meet, that is just a help. And sometimes I don't need to. If, like in this section, all of the pieces are 2 inches wide or wider, so I don't have as many seams that I have to meet together. But in other times, if I've got a lot of seams that I have to meet, then I will pin them in place, and that way I don't worry about them shifting before I get to sewing them together. And I'm watching all of those seams that I've got and making sure they stay in the right position and not flipping over. And that way I don't have to spend time ripping them out and redoing it again. Okay, here is the completed block, and it took a long time because there's just a lot of pieces in it. And at this point I wasn't sure if this block was going to work, and so I decided to pin it up on the design wall and just look at it and then decide from there if this was going to work, or if I was going to need to make changes or start all over with a completely different block. Okay, I have the piece block setting next to the embroidered block, and I'm not real happy with it, mostly because of the color. The purple is too bright, it's too prominent. So I had, when I was at the store, I bought some green that kind of matches the leaves and stems in the embroidered block. So I'm going to try that. I've got a different design. I also decided that maybe there was just too much in that piece block. I considered taking out all the 9 patches except the one that's in the center and seeing how that looked, but I still think the color is off. So I have another block that I just finished piecing, and I'm going to put that up and then we can look at those next to each other. Okay, here's the second block. I don't know. Everything's just kind of off. I mean, the green is pretty close, but there's not a whole lot of green showing in the embroidered block, so I just don't know. The white is a lot brighter white than what's in the embroidered block, so we've got that too. I just really don't know. I haven't decided if either one of them is right, so I'm gonna let this sit on the board for a while and think about it. Okay, well, I had decided that I needed to make a couple more samples, and in that top row in the center is a variation of the block that I had just completed, and what I had used as the background fabric is an off-white fabric, and it has a white on white or a cream on cream design in it, and they're little hearts, and they're all lined up in stripes, so it's a directional fabric. So I tried to cut this and piece it together so that all of those little stripes are going in the same direction, but I didn't quite get it. So that was one thing that was bothering me. Another thing that was bothering me is that it still wasn't the right color. It's a little too yellowish tan on the side there. It's still not matching, and I finally decided that I just wasn't going to find something that matches. Everything was either too creamy or it was too white, and I just needed to decide which way I wanted to go. I could have gone with a plain solid or tone on tone purple fabric like the batik and just use that, but I felt that was just too much purple. I could have found something that was lighter. You know, I had a lot of options, but I really did not want to run back to the store and shop for fabric again. And so I went and chose another block. And what I did was the lower right hand corner block is the first block that I made, only I removed all of the 9 patches that were on the sides and replaced them with the background fabric. And I decided out of those 3 that would probably be my best bet in this quilt top. So I went ahead and I made 3 more of those blocks. So you know how much time it took to make the first one. Well, this one was a little bit faster because I didn't have as many 9 patches to make. I only needed 1 for each block, and I saved the 9 patches that I had ripped out of the original block, and so I already had those made. So I just needed to make the 4 patches and then just the solid white for those blocks. And I also added 1 more row. I needed to make that block just a little bit bigger. It turned out to be 16.5 inches, and I really needed 17.5 inches. So I added another row and extended the purple squares just 1 more, and that kind of solved the problem. So here next I'm going to show you what it looks like with all the blocks up on the design wall. Okay, I have everything pinned up on the design wall now, and I'm pretty happy with the way that's turned out. I was really concerned about the difference in the color of the background of the embroidered blocks and the piece blocks, but since all the embroidered blocks are the same color and all the piece blocks are the same color, it actually looks fine. so I'm not really concerned about that now. I still need to trim up those embroidered blocks, and then I can piece them together, and then I'll do the borders, and then I'll be ready to quilt. Thanks for watching. For more quilting ideas, click on the video links, and to keep up with my latest projects, click on the subscribe button. I hope to see you again soon.